So first of all, who lives in Riverside? Who lives in the Assembly District 63? Which I do. Okay, well, if you don't know this, if you live in 63, Bill is our guy, right?
I'm the guy.
He's your guy, so you voted for him, and if you didn't vote for him, you're stuck with him, at least until the next election. So I've been talking to Bill for over a year to try to get you over here, and here you are. Which, by the way, if you're familiar with the legislature, they're in session right now. So why are you here? What? How did you get out of? You get to get out of school free card day, or?
So we meet as a body every Monday and Thursday, and we do this because we get a per diem, so they have to do it, or else they don't get paid. But in between that, we have committee hearings. So luckily I don't have any committee hearings today.
Okay.
So I flew down last night, and I'll go back tomorrow morning.
Okay. But did you hear what he said? Otherwise, they don't get paid. So are you not one of they? Are you not they?
Yeah, if I'm not there, we get paid by the day, so I'm not there today.
Get paid by the day. Yeah. Okay, so let's back up. And this is dangerous. Most of you know me, and you're here. I would assume most of you know me in one form or another. I really avoid. I'm a very political person. Okay, but I'm not a publicly political person. Okay, I really try to avoid that. So, where it might be a little peril over the next half hour or so. Sure. So, there are 62 assembly people in the state of California.
There are 80.
80 assembly.
80 assembly members.
Okay, and 62 of those are Democrats, and you're one of 18 Republicans.
Correct.
How's that going?
If you can count. We don't win many votes. So often we are the opposition. So we are there to, now look, there's a lot of bills. There's a lot of bills. Like we did 3,000 bills last year. We did about 900 bills last week. So none of you are safe. But a lot of bills are not controversial. They're feel-good things or things we all agree on. I would say 10 to 20% are we fight tooth and nail to either stop them or we try to pass good bills.
How many were last week? Six?
So last week was the deadline for a bill to pass out of the House of Origin. So all the Assembly bills had to be out of the Assembly, and all the Senate bills have to be out of the Senate. So we did almost, I want to say it was like 900 bills or something in the Assembly, and they did 300 or 400 in the Senate last week.
So,
and those are the ones that passed, not what was introduced.
That was introduced.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the sake of, we'll get maybe if this is, I don't know if this is controversial or not. Apparently it was. And then my goal today with Bill is to keep this housing related and try to keep I'm assuming we all generally are like minds here. But you've been in the news recently, the little mic drop thing we were talking about. So what was, who's familiar with what I'm talking about? Do we need to do the setup? Okay, so was that a week ago?
That was last week.
Okay, you're on the floor?
Yes.
And you're addressing the sanctuary state. Tell us about it and tell us what happened.
So for those of you who don't know, my background is public safety. I was a deputy DA here in Riverside County, did criminal jury trials here, and then I was a U.S. attorney at the Central District, so I did federal trials as well. So I care a lot about public safety. It's one of the reasons I got into public office. There have been some really disturbing stories lately where we have convicted people who committed horrendous crimes against children. They raped kids. They're convicted child predators, and it is the policy under the state of California that if you are a convicted criminal, any crime, and you're here illegally, we will not deport you. I don't understand why that is, but that is the policy of the state. So I brought a bill, it was very narrow. It just said if you're convicted of a sex crime against a minor, in that case, we will deport you. Now, because the place is run by the other party, they didn't even hear my bill. They didn't want to have a hearing on my bill. So I was left to try to force a vote on the floor, which is what I tried to do last week, to suspend the rules and hear the bill. And as soon as I described what the bill was, they cut my mic off and they voted it down.
Right.
Because they didn't want to highlight the policy of the state of California.
Okay, is what you described, and I'm going to challenge you.
Yeah.
Is that really what the bill said? Or was there something within that bill that's more controversial and it had to be
You could look it up. It's on our social media. You can get the link to the bill. You could read it yourself. It's a very short bill, and it just says for those convicted of these specified crimes, which are crimes against children, that in those cases, law enforcement must cooperate with immigration and customs officials.
Right. And we can't do that.
The California has a state law. So we're a sanctuary state. If you're the sheriff or any law enforcement official, it is illegal for you to cooperate with immigration officials. So when ICE puts a detainer and says, we want this individual in your custody, it is illegal for the sheriff to hand them over to ICE.
Right.
That is the policy of the state of California.
Well, I think I could do an hour on this.
Yeah.
We're not going to. But I don't know. That troubles me. There's so many things politically that are going on, and not to put words in Dr. Thornburg's mouth as far as the immigration thing. We need people. We got that. We need that. But there seems like there's a better way to do it.
Well, I don't like, the slide was great, the thing. One thing I took offense to, that he lumped us all as migrants. I tell you, I am offended by that. My parents are immigrants. Okay. They came here legally. They came from Lebanon. They did it the right way. They applied, they learned English, they learned about our system of government, they learned we're a constitutional republic, they learned that we have checks and balances, they learned what the system was, and they became American citizens.
Right.
It is not the same.
Right.
It is not the same when you cut the line, you come here illegally, and we don't know who you are, what you've done, and what you're about. And to lump us together is offensive.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not blaming you. I'm just saying everyone does it. They just say immigrants. I'm like, there's a big difference between legal and illegal immigration.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. So again, we could go on for a while, but I want to focus on kind of why we're here.
Housing.
And Bill, by the way, you're going to hang around for the Q&A?
Yes, I'll be here for Q&A.
We're running a little bit long, so we may not finish at 12:20, 12:30. So for those of you who want to hang around and maybe you ask Bill whatever you want. I'm certainly not going to censor any of the questions. But I want to talk a little bit about housing.
Yes.
So I was up with Bill. I'm on the California Association of Realtors Board of Directors. I was with Bill up in Sacramento 2-3 weeks ago. And we're chatting, just like we're going to do today. We've done very little preparation for this. We just we're just going to
5-minute call.
5 minutes, and we're just going to sit down and talk. So, but one of the things, who's a realtor in the room? Okay, so by default, you're all members of the California Association of Realtors, at least for the moment. So we go up periodically a couple times a year, and we try to figure out what's going on. At least once a year, we go to Sacramento, and these are my words, not yours, but what I took away from you is that we as an organization are legislatively timid.
Yes.
And we will not put forward legislation that unless we feel it's going to get passed.
Yes.
If we think it's going to get defeated, I'm talking housing for the most part. That's what we go there for, is housing rights. And again, do you remember exactly what you said as far as get in the game or put it out there?
I say a lot of things.
Okay. You do.
But I said it's important to play offense. Not defense. That's
right.
what I think I said. And one thing I really liked about, I'm sorry, what's our economist's name?
Chris
again?
Thornburg.
Chris has did a good job talking about narratives. And he's right. In Sacramento, there's so many false narratives. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of industry play into those narratives, right? So every meeting I take, there are certain words I know are always going to be used. Equity, climate. It's just no matter what the issue is, these words are going to come up. But to your point, like the Realtors Association, frankly, a lot of business groups, they say what they think the Democrats want to hear. And, and they want to do a bill that everyone will like. And they don't want any opposition, they don't want resistance, and they don't want to make anyone upset. Well, if you're going to destroy false narratives, I'm sorry, you're going to upset some people. That's why we throw chairs, That's
why we get offended.
That's why you get offended by it. And so my frustration has been with industries like as powerful and resourceful and important as the realtors is we sit on the sidelines. And often, what were you guys up there doing? Opposing bad bills. Generally. Yeah. Opposing bad bills. There's so many bad bills to oppose. I'm tired of just opposing bills. Why don't we write the bills and advance them and call them out and say, listen, State of California, Democrat Party, if you care about housing, here's the housing bill. Reform CEQA. Clean up the regulations. Make it easier to build. I mean, you just heard Ito put out this plan. I mean, it could take 15, 20 years, not because that's how long it takes to build, but that's how long it would take to get through the muck.
Yeah.
So we have a very schizophrenic policy in the state of California. We say we want housing now, but our policies and regulations make it impossible to build quickly and efficiently and affordably. Right. And this is a schizophrenic approach. So I would say the realtors would draft a bill that streamlines and regulates and actually makes it a place and a climate where people want to build and can build, and that will increase housing. Something about politicians is they think they think they're like God. They think they write it and it's so. So they said, we want to build 1 million homes next week. And they think that magically 1 million homes will build. They don't understand the market.
Right.
It is the market. And so I think the government's job is to create the market conditions and the policies that will attract investors and attract the builders, attract the EDOs of the world to actually build.
Yeah, well, that's why I don't know if, I know Ito's schedule was tight, I don't know if he stepped out or not, but this project that Ito just referred to, and God, I hope you're wrong, that 10 or 15 years to get to that point, I've been talking to Ito about this project for 10 or 15 years. But the part that scared me, he said, hey, maybe we're going to do something next 12 to 18 months, but then he's talking about an EIR going public today or tomorrow. God, that just sounds like another 10 or 12 years to just to get past that process. And if you're familiar with what Ito has done out with the World Logistics Center on the east end of Moreno Valley, there's just been nothing but opposition to that. Nothing. Okay, you mentioned CEQA.
You know, funny about CEQA, when the government wants to build something, do you know what they do? They exempt themselves from CEQA.
From CEQA.
We are rebuilding. So if you were in Sacramento, you saw my office is not in the Capitol.
Yep.
They demolished the Capitol offices because they're rebuilding them. And we're in temporary spaces now. They call them the swing space. And that whole project is CEQA exempt.
Of course.
The Kings Stadium.
Because you couldn't get it done.
Yes. The basketball stadium they built in Sacramento is exempt from CEQA.
And by the way, how long did it take for them from planning to opening the Sacramento Kings Stadium?
I don't know the dates. Do you know? It was probably pretty quick.
Well, I don't. All I know is I was going up to Sacramento every year, and I took a 5-year break, and I showed up for the first time in, I guess, 4 or 5 years last year. And I'm like, where did this... If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, in downtown Sacramento is the new Sacramento Kings arena, where they play a basketball game. It's beautiful.
It's been there at least 2 years. I mean, they must have built it under 2 years.
Okay, on CEQA, and I don't want this to be a jab. Senator Richard Roth, are you guys familiar with Senator Roth? He's State Senator Richard Roth. He represents probably a good chunk of you in this room. Who knows who I'm talking about? Okay, good. Because I was about ready to slap the audience. Okay, so I support Senator Roth. He's a good guy. But we were in Sacramento at the same time, actually about 2 hours before I met with Bill last month. And CEQA came up. And it's going to sound like I'm slapping Senator Roth, but we had talked about CEQA, and we talked about CEQA reform. And Senator Roth said, oh, yeah, we tried that. And then he proceeded to tell, and again, I'm going to have the dates wrong, so if there's anybody from Senator Roth's office, feel free to stand up and correct me. But he said, yeah, we tried that 12 years ago. And apparently he supported a bill to reform CEQA, and it failed. Oh, and that was the end of the conversation. So I'm like, well... And then I saw you 2 hours later, and then you said go on offense.
Yes.
So to CEQA's point, I mentioned earlier, I've chased Chris Thornburg around forever, and I don't think that the word CEQA came up in his speech today, but I've heard it 1,000 times, CEQA reform. So what's going on with CEQA reform?
There is no CEQA reform. Nothing.
Zero.
There are members who will acknowledge we need to do it, but nobody has the political will or appetite to actually put it forward and push it through.
Right.
And that's why I think you really need an organization like yours to... so you guys may not know how Sacramento works. Most of the bills are not written by legislators. Most of them are barely literate, I'm going to be honest with you. They're not capable of writing a bills. There aren't many lawyers in the legislature. Most of them are activists. So most of the bills are what we call sponsored bills. So organizations like the Realtors or Cal Chamber write the bills. And they just use our office to speak to Ledge Council.
Right.
So you guys could write a bill that includes CEQA reform, that includes infrastructure investment. One thing that really annoys me is this policy we have now where it's the developer's responsibility to build all the public infrastructure for every project.
Right.
When did that responsibility get transferred from government to the public sector? And we all know what that means. It's just going to increase the cost of the project.
Well, it's been that way as long as I've been doing this. I mean, who remembers Melrose?
Yeah.
Melrose, that was 35 years ago. I don't know how long it existed before that, but that's basically the same thing.
I just think government should be building public infrastructure, roads, sewers, transportation. That's the government's job, right? My personal view, I don't like the fact that the only thing they build now are toll roads that cost $20 to go one way. It's highway robbery.
Right.
Literally. Anyway, but you can write the bill and then call it the Housing Act or the Housing Bill, and then you put them on record and you say, if you don't support this, then you're not supporting housing. And you got to change the narrative and make them go a little bit on defense.
Right.
Nobody does that in Sacramento because they know the Democrats have so many votes and are very punitive and petty, and they will retaliate, and they will come after your industry. They will come after your lobbyists.
Well,
and that is the culture in Sacramento. It is very much about power and control. And
okay,
coercion.
well, I'm going to try to walk this delicately because I'm sure we have some Democrats in the room, and again, God forbid anybody who's upset.
And I differentiate elected Democrats from Democrat voters because they are. I believe a lot of Democrat voters are well-intended, right?
Sure.
And they, but the politics, it's got. Anytime you have extremes. We have a supermajority in California, whether it's a Republican supermajority or a Democrat supermajority. I would argue excess power is a bad thing. Right. It's corruptive, it's corrosive.
Okay, I specifically want to talk about landlord-tenant, and Chris Thornburg had mentioned a bill, I guess that's working its way through. I'm not sure exactly where it's at. But before we go to that, again, we have a bunch of, by the way, it's realtor. You got an A.
Realtor.
Drives me crazy. No. Get rid of the A. There's no extra A. It's just realtor.
Realtor.
You guys know, again, I'm trying to be polite, but you guys know how when someone says that word, it just drives, Realtor. It's okay. I apologize. We'll cut that part out of the video.
You should see what they call lawyers.
Oh, I can imagine. Okay. So, for those of you realtors, okay, and again, there's probably 3 of you that I recognize that actually go to Sacramento, are active, and actually go anything past, logging onto the MLS on a daily basis. Okay. The thing that attracted me to you when we were in Sacramento is we have to be proactive. I've been associated with California Association of Realtors for 30 plus years, and we don't do anything that's not safe. And he's correct. We write the bills. Okay, we write them. They don't write them. We write them. We go to someone like Assemblyman Essayli and say, hey, would you sponsor this? And who can we get on board? And unless we get this overwhelming yes, we don't do it, okay? We don't sponsor legislation because that means money, okay? I don't know. It just seems like that needs to change. And occasionally we have to spend some money that we know is going to go the wrong way, which is why I mentioned earlier your legislation that you're trying to put forward with the basically felons, child molesters who have been convicted, and we can't see it. I mean, God, how the hell is that controversial? I don't get that. Okay, so having said that, so let's get active. Otherwise, all we're going to do is we're going to be talking. I'm going to be dead, and we're going to be talking about CEQA reform. I'm going to be dead, and Ito isn't going to be able to finish the World Logistics Center or this community in Marine Valley he's talking about. It's just ridiculous. Okay, so
but that's how you change narrative. So I put that bill forward. I knew it would never pass.
Okay.
But I wanted to have a public airing, and I wanted to have a public vote, and I wanted to change the narrative.
Right.
And now, because of what happened, it's national news.
It is.
It's all over the media, and people are waking up and saying, wait a minute, why do we have this policy? And that is how change happens. It's slow, and it's ugly sometimes, and it's messy. Right. But you have to be willing to
Well, it
do
is
that.
ironic because, and I told Bill this, again, we talked 5 minutes. I said, I had people call me and tell me to cancel you. Okay?
Yeah.
Do not, seriously. Yeah, I booked him. I'm like, I just got the guy to commit like a week ago, and now you want me to cancel him? I'm like, no, I'm not going to cancel him. I mean, you don't have to agree with everything he's going to say. Maybe there's some things that you guys feel are wrong, but I don't know. You gotta put your neck out. You got to put your neck out there. You got to give it a go. And then a couple days later, by the way, the part about canceling you had nothing to do with the mic cutoff moment in that particular bill. Okay, let's go back to housing real quick.
Yeah. So,
and I don't know when did you get elected, by the way?
November 2022.
Okay, so you're new. Okay, so before Bill's time, who's familiar with Tenant Protection Act? Who? Okay, most of you who are familiar with that are probably own property or thinking about buying property. Tenant Protection Act is pre-COVID. Okay, that bill was basically passed in 2019. For the most part, it took effect in 2020. It kind of became, in fact, I even started calling it like the COVID Tenant Protection Act, but that's inaccurate because this bill was passed pre-COVID. So if you're not familiar with that, it basically changed all the rules. Is Barry still in the room? Barry, okay. Barry O'Connor, I've got a slide up here with Barry later. I shot an hour-long video with Barry. In my opinion, hands down, the #1 best eviction landlord tenant attorney on the planet. He's, I guess I've been my client. It's funny because I consider you probably consider me your client. I consider you my client. But at any rate, he's been doing landlord tenant law and eviction stuff with us forever. And I'll paraphrase because if you want to know what he said, watch his video. It's on the link tree. The world has changed so dramatically as it relates to the landlord-tenant rights, but it came out of, I believe, out of a false narrative. A lot of that Tenant Protection Act, I believe, was all kind of around rent control, and the landlords are evil, and I'm sure there are some evil ones, and the tenants need protection, and I'm sure there's some that need protection. But so that bill has been in place. It basically kicked in January 1, 2020, about 3 months pre-COVID. So let me set this up and tell me if you got a comment on this, because again, we didn't prepare for this. What have rents done since January 2020? Skyrocketed. Why?
Supply and demand.
Supply, demand, inflation, blah, 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 blah.
You have to raise rents.
My man.
Yep.
My man. Steve,
Maximum amount every year.
Stephen McKee. Okay, so if you didn't hear what Stephen said, Stephen basically said you have to raise rents. If you are, and that was, I am confident that when the legislature was debating that bill, nobody sat back and said, we're going to create a bill that requires the landlords to raise rents. And that's exactly what we did. By the way, it's 5% plus the CPI not to exceed a total of 10%. So for the most part, I know there's some exceptions, and I got that. Talk to Barry, watch his videos. But for the most part, what that has meant, because of this narrative that we needed to protect tenants, it's basically required, and again, I know I'm using required loosely, required landlords to raise their rent 10% every year. And by the way, if you didn't do that pre-2020, what happened in 2019 to rents? They blew up, okay? They blew up because if Jan owned a rental and she was being nice to her tenant and said, you know what, you're good, I'm gonna leave you alone, I'm not gonna raise your rent. And then she read the law, she said, well, geez, I can't be nice to you anymore. I can't be nice to you, I gotta raise your rent because I can never catch up. So what are we doing about that, Bill?
Absolutely nothing. And this is the law of unintended consequences. And this is the problem when you try to control the market.
Yep.
The market will adapt, and the market's a lot smarter than the politicians. And so I wasn't there, but I guarantee you people tried to argue that this was going to hurt renters because the landlord will have to raise the rent every year because they can't predict when they will need to raise it in the future. And they want to protect themselves. And if everyone's doing it, they're all going to raise it equally. Same thing, LA, they put in some crazy millionaire tax to sell properties. And what happened? They sold all before it went into place, and now they've just completely halted sales.
Unintended consequences.
And so, but I think the misconception here, the disconnect, is you think the people in Sacramento actually care about the consequences. They don't care. What I've witnessed in Sacramento, it is all about virtue signaling. I'm a good person, I have a good idea, it's good intended, and this is my bill. You have 80 people there, we get to each write up to 50 bills, and they write 50 bills each. Yep. And it's all about them and passing a bill. It's hard to explain this. The only thing they care is passing a bill with their name on it to say they did something. And if you watch our committee hearings, we give about 5 minutes per bill in committee. There's no substantive debate. Every Democrat bill passes committee. 90% of Republican bills will die in the committee. And that's just the way it is. There is no, I hate to say it, there is no debates or dialogue or informed conversations happening in Sacramento. It doesn't happen. And I think it comes down to we have unserious people in elected office. And I really think the problem with politics today is good people, hardworking people have no interest in politics. They're so disgusted or dissuaded or turned off. They want nothing to do with it. And so who do we have running for office now? I'm telling you, it is activists. It is radical, politically ideological people. And they don't care about the everyday people. It's about advancing a political cause. I'm saying that's both sides, by the way. I'm one of the rare people up there. Like I have a law practice. I still work. I'm still employed. I don't depend on government for my living. And so for me, I don't really care if I get reelected or not. I mean, I want to get reelected.
That's funny.
I want to get reelected,
Who
but
believes what he just said? No, and
listen.
but by the way, I didn't mean that as a joke. I actually believe. Matter of fact, I told Drake that. I told my son Drake and my other son Drew. By the way, I probably should have mentioned you guys earlier. Drake and I were driving here, and we're talking about you. I said, I don't think this guy gives a rip one way or the other if he gets reelected.
I care about doing the right thing. I really do, because I mean, whether I was a prosecutor, I mean, I really feel this sense of obligation. I represent 500,000 people, 500,000 people I look out for, and I always try to be cognizant of that when I'm in the room, that I speak for all the working people every day, people that don't come up to Sacramento.
Yep.
Because in Sacramento, the only people you hear from are lobbyists or other politicians or some interest group. That's it. That is the echo chamber up there. And I care about doing the right thing, and I think that's the beauty of our representative democracy. You know, our founding fathers didn't believe in a pure democracy. They wanted a representative democracy where we take people from the community who've accomplished things and we send them into government for a short period of time, not forever, and to represent us. And I think we've gone away from that. Now we have like these career politicians, and they're self-interested. All they care about is getting reelected. And if they got to sell you out to make a deal to get some money or campaign contributions, they're happy to do it.
It's broken. Okay,
It's
this is it.
broken.
We're way over time,
All right.
but are you going to stick around for the Q&A?
I'm here for the Q&A.
Okay, we're going to Q&A. We're going to bring up Gary Malice here in a minute. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, buddy.
Absolutely.
All righty.